Hello, everybody. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay. I don't know if you guys are able to hear me right now, but I can see the presentation. All right, let's get into this. I've got just a thing there on if anyone wants to connect with me on social media. There's some of my social media profiles. I go under PropTech.tv for my Facebook page and for Instagram, and then I also have a YouTube channel called PropTech TV. Just giving people a chance to log in, anyone who's late. So hello and welcome, and a quick shout out to Wouter and to Linda, the team at Global PropTech. It's great to be a part of this, and this is an extremely relevant topic in my mind. I believe it represents a major opportunity and a major threat to all of us. And so the structure of this talk, I'm going to do 20 minutes of a presentation followed by 10 minutes Q&A. And I believe we have a Q&A kind of panel there. So if anyone wants to submit a question, just put it there and I'll deal with it at the end. First of all, some context, as in who is this guy? Who is Gavin Gallagher? Gavin J Gallagher, by the way. If you're ever searching me, the J is important because there's like 50 other Gavin Gallaghers out there. What qualifies me to speak in this topic? Well, a little bit of backstory to me. I'm a property investor, developer, and operator. I have about 25 years of experience in, hold on a second, have you got the right? That would probably be better. I've got about 25 years of experience in the commercial sector primarily. I've been an architect for a period of time. I'm based in Ireland, but I have international experience, having spent about 10 years abroad. And a little bit of background. So I qualified as an architect in the 1990s, practiced for a couple of years with a firm called Scott Talman Walker. They're a major firm in Dublin. And before leaving to go out on my own, established my own small firm in 98. But then less than 6 months later, my uncle, who happened to be chairman of a family property business, he died, and I had to join the group to kind of represent the family. And within 6 months of his death, the CEO died. And so we ended up basically running a property business, kind of not part of the plan. One of the major developments underway at the time was this development here, Eastpoint, which is a business park I manage here in Dublin. Eastpoint has got about 9,000 people working in it on a day-to-day basis. There's 37 buildings, and there is about 50 different corporate occupiers, from multinationals like Oracle and Google, all the way to some smaller firms. And between all of them, there's about 140,000 square meters of office accommodation, or 1.5 million square feet. The park is laid out in kind of a campus. You can see it in the photograph there. Total day-to-day management of the park includes pretty much everything. We transport about 3,500 people a day on our shuttle service, which brings people to the local transport hubs. We have a lot of different security, landscaping, maintenance, all of that kind of stuff. And the park is currently going through a major upgrade that we're involved in, because it's now about 20 years old. So it's about time some of the technology and things that I'm going to talk about today are some of the things that we're currently employing. Outside of my role in Eastpoint and Earlsfort, my firm had an active kind of role in development management. We did a number of things with a lot of banks in Dublin, and so built small kind of retail buildings like this one here, and various schemes around the country for firms like Earlsfort and Blockbuster and various things like that. In 2008, I took a sabbatical from East Point, and I moved abroad. I spent a couple of years in Spain before moving to Dubai, where I worked on this building on the left. It's for Standard Chartered Bank. It was a headquarter building, main headquarters for the UAE. And that was a very successful project. It worked very well. We purpose-built the building to Standard Chartered Bank's global technical standards. And they were so pleased with it that we got the second building to do for them in Ghana. So I spent some time in Accra in Ghana as well. So that's just a little bit of context as to my background, summing up my career. You would obviously say that I have mostly spent my time in commercial. And so while all of the principles I'm going to cover today would apply to all buildings, my experience being so specialized in commercial, I think it's probably makes sense for me to focus on the commercial side of things. So rather than talking specifically about smart and healthy buildings, I'm going to be looking at the smart and healthy workplace. And so if we go into what makes a workplace smart or what makes a workplace healthy, I'm just going to go out of the slideshow for a second and go into my camera. Obviously buildings, I mean, if you go into a definition, you've got any structure. A smart building is any structure that automates processes to automatically control the operation of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, lighting, security, and other systems. In other words, property, technology, and innovation. And we all know PropTech obviously is a big part of the landlord's kind of required skill sets these days. In terms of healthy buildings, this is something that's probably newer, although I would suggest it's more important. Healthy buildings, if you do a sort of Google definition, refers to an emerging area of interest that supports the physical, psychological, and social health and well-being of people in buildings and the built environment. In other words, health and wellness. So what is so important about this? And what are the drivers? And I think the drivers is an important aspect of it, because you've got to understand what is driving the organizations that need the buildings. And I would say the biggest thing that's driving most offices these days is the talent war, the recruitment of talent, the recruitment of employees is absolutely critical to the success of any business. And nowadays people have so much choice that if the building isn't up to standard, they can move on pretty quickly. And certainly the guys that I work with in East Point, big companies like Oracle and stuff, they spend vast sums of money on their buildings because they want to make them as attractive as possible for all of their staff. And I'm just going to go back into my slideshow now. So the drivers, obviously, if we go into the drivers, I actually use Formula One. I've been a bit of a fan for years, and it's actually a great metaphor for the kind of the package that is an employee, a business or an organization, and a company. And the building that they occupy is kind of like the car, and the team is the business, and the driver is are the employees. And you can take one on its own. A very, very talented driver on his own is going to achieve nothing without a good team behind him. And then equally, the team behind them, they need a great car. And so I liken the thing to how important a building is in your for a company. Without a building working you're going to find that staff are leaving, and I mean, they're getting unhealthy, or they're just not satisfied, not inspired, not motivated by their work environment. One of the things that I have been working on in identifying the various things that would drive a person to want to stay with your business is, I call it the Aspire model. And by that, I mean A for architecture, S for sustainability, P for people, I for innovation, or for regime, and E for experience. And if I go and take you through these various items, the Aspire method, architecture being the first one. This building here in the photograph is the Bloomberg headquarters in London, and I was at it a couple of months ago, and it's an exceptionally beautiful piece of architecture. In terms of inspiration, most people that would work at this building would be incredibly inspired, and it would be difficult to leave a building of this quality to go to a place that doesn't sort of stack up to the same thing. So architecture obviously involves interiors, exteriors, the spatial arrangement. This is a photograph from the Microsoft office headquarters here in Dublin. And I was in there recently, and another very, very inspiring piece of architecture. The way they've laid it out, they've got collaboration spaces, and it also builds their brand strength. And the three things that a business is trying to achieve are the 3 C's. They're trying to allow their staff to collaborate, obviously, but then there's space needed for them to concentrate, whether they're studying or getting something prepared. And then there's obviously communication. And one of the reasons why WeWork was such a good product market fit is because it managed to have this variety of spaces so that you could actually go in and fulfill all these functions. Now, obviously, WeWork is in the news for all the wrong reasons these days, but I think as a concept, it's a great idea, just the valuation was wrong. You take any building that has a multitude of spaces, and that is going to be utilized far more than a traditional office. And that is one of the major impacts that people are finding that are running businesses now, that the building is not getting the same utilization as it used to. In some of my relationships with banks here in Ireland I've been speaking with, I found that they're actually looking at reducing the amount of accommodation that they have, like desk space, down to about 80 desks per 100 people employed in the business. And they're actually looking to reduce that further to about 60 desks, and 20 desks would be held in a type of a WeWork flex space arrangement, so that they don't have the fixed cost and they can kind of scale up and scale down at any stage in time. This is obviously an expensive thing to do. Beautiful architecture costs money, but I do think that for the large companies that are involved, they get the return on investment because they attract the best talent, and that's obviously a difficult thing to do in this day and age. Obviously, the next thing highly correlated to architecture is sustainability. Definitely the biggest issue facing mankind at the moment. And when I say highly correlated to architecture, obviously the building is 40% of greenhouse gases are actually coming from the real estate industry. And this is when I mention that I believe healthy and smart buildings are a major opportunity and also a major threat. I believe that at some point in the future, there's going to be this climate change moment of truth when people realize that the temperature is starting to go outside of the areas that we consider to be safe. And there could be a sudden sort of change by governments where they suddenly make greenhouse gases and the production, the carbon footprint of your buildings and things, they could suddenly be forced to do things that are very, very drastic. And it may be that social unrest is a driver behind this. Many of us will have seen climate protests in recent weeks, and that could actually grow in the coming years. So I think it actually makes enormous sense for investment in sustainable buildings. Obviously, the Edge in Amsterdam, Wouter will be familiar with this building, and it's just a beautiful building. Until recently, until that Bloomberg building was completed, that building was the greenest, or what is it, the most sustainable building on the planet, and also the smartest. And there is a good reason why the two are correlated. because you can't have a green building without all of the data and the functionality that you need in order to manage a building for its occupants the way this building does. It's since Bloomberg's building has been built in London, which has now replaced this. Obviously, Deloitte occupy this building here in Amsterdam, and they've replied. I was at a conference where the project manager for this building spoke, and he mentioned that 68% of staff that apply for jobs at Deloitte actually mention the fact that they want to work in this building, which is a major driver, obviously, for the employers. Getting on to what we all have to do. This is from East Point, where I'm based. Oracle spent a lot of money renovating their building. Obviously, they've put in the solar panels. They've put in the green floor, or the green roof. And a lot of this stuff is very important. Obviously, healthy buildings are equally important, that it's healthy for the environment. And people are going to become more and more vociferous about this kind of thing. And young people in particular, millennials, are going to vote with their feet. If a building is not sustainable, they are going to leave their employer out of shame, I guess. P in the Aspire model is for people. Now, this is an extreme photograph. Obviously, the idea that I'm trying to get across here is the hot and cold that occupies a lot of buildings. In terms of air quality, that is obviously a major driver, but just temperature control is one of the things that I hear facility managers talking about all the time, that one of your staff might be wearing a coat and they're frozen, while across the desk, the other staff member is roasting hot and in a t-shirt and it's just too hot. So it's a very fine line in terms of temperature management, and that is one of the reasons why buildings have changed, and having a variety of space is so important, because the ability to move around the building and decide if you're concentrating on work, you can go to a quiet place that's cool versus a place that's maybe warmer and like a meeting room or something like that. People are looking for three things. They're looking for connection, community, and contribution, and the importance of creating just things like this. Biophilia, hugely beneficial for a person's mental health. And so it's not just their physical health, but their mental health. And I've seen one of the things that I've noticed happening a lot with a lot of our occupiers is that they're asking questions about wellness certification. There is this new thing called WELL, which in the same way that LEED and BREEAM would give you sustainability certification and measurements, the wellness program actually tells people whether or not a building has good air quality, whether it's got good water quality, whether or not it's got enough green. And all of this kind of stuff is highly important in terms of maintaining a good work life balance for the staff and the occupants. Innovation. Obviously critical to all of the management of these systems and stuff is that now there's a very fine line, obviously, between security and privacy and stuff like that. This photograph is a little extreme, obviously, but the point is that security is, there's a fine line between breaking people's privacy and the security requirements. In East Point, we would have about 60 cameras in place, but data is where it's really important. The recovery of information, the number of visitors, the amount of space that's being utilized by the building. This here comes from that smart building in Amsterdam. The amount of data that those guys managed to derive from all of the different sensors, the IoT, it's critical to the building, and it gives you a competitive advantage in the running of the building. R is for regime, and by that I mean the management regime of your building. Facility managers and the assets are also critical to the quality of life that the occupants of the buildings experience. And so how you manage the building is going to have a huge impact on the health. For example, your maintenance regime. Are you cleaning out your water tanks? Are you getting your water tested? There's a huge amount of that kind of area. How often are you replacing the filters in your air conditioning system. The air quality has a direct impact on people's ability to concentrate on work, which obviously impacts their productivity. So this whole thing is kind of connected and interrelated. And architecture feeds into sustainability. Sustainability feeds into the people's requirement for contribution. Everything sort of is connected. And obviously things, you know, whether you're managing your building properly, you'll find very quickly that people are not using it the way it was intended. And are you carrying out inspections, things of that nature? It's a constant, there's a lot of work involved. Finally, the experience, this experience, whether people feel healthy, whether they feel happy, is hugely important for the occupant, particularly millennials, which are the big cohort that occupiers are trying to recruit these days. And we put on festivals and things like that in East Point because we want people to have this sense of buzz and atmosphere and community in the park. And this was another example. Really just an excuse for me to put a photograph of my little daughter. So anyway, I have a book coming out, guys. If you have any interest in registering for updates on my book, you can find it on my blog, gavingallagher.blog/book. And now I will turn off my screen share and I'll go back to the video. So I see we have a couple of Q&A questions. So I will open up the, just trying to get this Q&A panel open. I can't seem to open the Q&A panel right now. I don't know what's.
Okay.
Seems to, yeah, I don't know why it's not opening for me here. I seem to be having a problem with the Q&A. I can't see anybody's questions on the screen here.
Okay, Kevin, the question is, for the data collected from buildings, how much of that is important to share with occupants? Will this help to support building occupants to feel comfortable with so much data being collected?
I think it's a very good question, and it comes to my point on privacy. As long as you can demonstrate that this has been done to raise the overall environment, the atmosphere, the benefits, collecting, I mean, people don't want Big Brother looking over their shoulder and being asked to present, you know, identification and the feeling that maybe you're being spied on. But I do think it's critical information. For example, how many people are sitting on a seat in a particular area of a building. All of that is data that feeds into your ability to manage the spaces better. So whereas I do believe there is a fine line. I mean, in East Point, we are ourselves looking at putting in a whole new CCTV camera system. And in doing that, we were looking at analytics and the ability to actually put facial recognition into the cameras. It was ruled out because that was considered to be a step too far, even though there are people that don't have concerns about this kind of thing, that they're quite open. I mean, people share a huge amount on video and Facebook and LinkedIn and all this kind of stuff. Those people tend not to, you know, to fear this kind of intrusion into your life. But whether or not I think there's a fine line. And certainly in our case, we're trying to collect as much data as possible around temperature, air quality, and also just the usage of the building so that we know whether or not a certain configuration is working or whether we should be looking at changing it when it comes to the next redecoration or reconfiguration of the building. Any other questions?
No, there are no more questions, Gavin. Anything else you want to share with us?
Well, I mean, in terms of the health and I think the entire thing is connected. I think health is probably more important to the occupants than the smart side of it. But then from the operational side of it, the smart side of it is the part that we want. We want the data. We want to be able to analyze all of that stuff. And so I think it's kind of the two coming together. And there's a big balance between the two. You've got the health. I mean, occupants at the end of the day, they just want to be happy and they want to feel that they're healthy, and they want good air quality. They want good water quality. They want to be able to run to work, and the facilities are there at the end to be able to take a shower. I see a lot of our major occupiers putting in yoga facilities, like studios, in order to kind of have wellness classes, meditation rooms. All of this is becoming a major element of it, and it's part of the talent war. But then on the company side, it's essential for your ability to have, say, a sustainable building. You need the data. You need to know how much water you're consuming. You need to know where your power is being derived from, how much of your power is coming from solar. All of those aspects are critically important. I see, is there a second question? I see two.
Yes, there's a second question. What are favorite PropTech solutions that you would recommend for best Aspire implementation? Is one of them key for health of the people, for sustainability or cost and energy efficiency, or it needs to be configured individual per building?
I think it depends. I've been looking at, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, the overall experience is critically important to the retention of staff. If somebody doesn't feel happy or inspired going to work every day, they're not going to stay in that place. And so the overall, it's not just, it's a kind of a little bit of everything sprinkled into it. If one of the things that we're trying to create in East Point is community, and we're looking at this PropTech. We're looking at two PropTech solutions at the moment. One is called Locale, and Locale is a kind of community engagement, occupier engagement tool, and it allows us to communicate and spread news and information to all of our occupiers. It allows them to communicate stuff with us, and us to pass on anything like maintenance requirements and stuff directly to people that can actually do it, creating tickets and stuff. Now we're looking at a second option as well that's much more on the management side of things, less on the actual, less on the engagement side. And by management, I mean it's got a capability to measure, quality of air and all of the various things that people want to know. I've seen inside the Oracle buildings that are in our park, they now have a television screen that's telling people how much water was consumed that day, where the power is being derived from, how much of it is coming from solar energy. All of this stuff can't be done without sensors, and it feeds into the overall experience that the occupants actually have. So I think it's very much tied in. The reason I created the Aspire model is because I feel the whole thing is actually interlinked. One strength without the other items is actually going to create drawbacks as well. So you have to try to kind of manage all of them. It's kind of the weakest link of a chain, and the chain breaks. So each of them I would consider to be important links in the chain.